What's up everyone? My name is Shaelyn and on this channel everything's alright. So it is the last Thursday of November. I know you guys got October's Breaking 10,000 Barriers episode the first week of November, so it's a little bit like redundant, I guess. But I'm trying to stay on schedule. Now I'm back. And it's the second last Breaking 10,000 Barriers episode of 2022. Isn't that crazy? I feel like we were just in January starting this series last month. No, but in all honesty, we have gone through a lot this year trying to improve progress. And by we, I mean me. But you guys have been along for the journey as well. So I'm really looking forward to next month's episode where I analyze the progress that I've made this year by comparing my progress to January's footage. That is going to be crazy. Anyway, without further ado, let's jump right into November's episode of Breaking 10,000 Barriers. So, starting off with the hand category. So you guys know I always start every exercise session with weight bearing on my left arm because it really takes away a lot of my tone that I have. In the footage of me at the end of the month doing the weight bearing, you can see that it was a bit painful. That's just real life. It's not always rainbows and butterflies, stretching through paralyzed limbs. It is actually almost always really painful. Moving on to the first exercise in the hand category, flexing and extending my wrist. In the footage at the beginning of the month, it looks very much the same as always. Like I've said before, this one is going to take quite a long time. I did have some progress back in my beginning stages of my recovery when I was first out of the hospital. I did have a little bit of an ability to lift my wrist and then just let go and drop it, but over the years I've completely lost that, so it's going to be quite a journey to regain that. I think it's really difficult for me, so as you know, just taking it through that movement is pretty much all I can do at this point in regard to that exercise. This next exercise is supination and pronation of my wrist. So in the footage from the beginning of the month, actually I didn't really pay attention to this, but I did do something a little bit different. I was just holding my wrist and twisting it instead of having to re-grip every time I wanted to supinate or pronate. So that was kind of cool. It was very fluid to move it through that movement pattern, and honestly, not that difficult. I found that to be pretty easy that time around. But then I have quite a bit of footage that I'm putting in this video from the end of the month. So in this first clip, I was about to start supinating and pronating, and then I realized how loose the tone was in my wrist. So I let go to see if my hand would just kind of relax, and it did, and I was really shocked and surprised, happily surprised, obviously, but I was kind of confused why it was so loose. But then I started my exercises. I decided to kind of keep doing what I accidentally did, that first rep that I did. And so this was an improvement for sure. I start by supinating my wrist upward, and then I just let go to work on bringing my hand around and pronating all by myself, instead of taking it through with my able hand. And that's what I did for all of my reps, and it made me feel really strong, and yeah, I'm really happy and surprised that I was able to do that. Moving on to opening and closing my hand. The footage at the beginning of the month looks pretty much the same that the other months have been recently, the past few months I think. Fingers are still opening pretty well. My middle finger still struggles quite a bit. And then the footage at the end of the month, it does look very similar to the footage at the beginning of the month, I'm not gonna lie. But then I wanted to include this footage in because I discovered something when I was filming last night that was not the best about my wrist. I was just slightly bending and straightening my wrist with my able hand, and I realized that my bone, I'm not sure what bone it was like the one right here on the corner of my wrist that was popping in and out of socket every time I was straightening and bending my wrist very slightly. I will say I did break my wrist in the 3rd grade, so I think it has something to do with that. But if you have hemiplegia or any paralysis in your arms or wrists or hands, please be very careful. If you discover something like that, don't keep doing it because you could seriously cause some damage and injure yourself further, so make sure you don't do that. Moving on to the arm category. The first exercise is flexing and extending my bicep, straightening and bending my arm, whatever you may call it. The footage at the beginning of the month, honestly, all of the footage from the beginning of the month is kind of looking a bit stiff. I'm working through the movements as best as I can, but they do look slightly stiff. I will say, and I've said this before, I don't know what month it was, but whenever I take a bath before I do my exercises, my muscles tend to be so relaxed. So I really should implement that in my normal routine when I'm doing my exercises because it seriously helps me get so much movement. So I think I should just take a bath before I do my exercises. I don't know, or a shower, anything with like heat or hot water. The footage from the end of the month looks much more fluid and smooth, looking really strong there, so that's good. The next exercise is raising my arm straight above my head. The footage at the beginning of the month, again, I think I've said this recently that I've had a hard time getting my elbow completely straight. It is slightly bent, not anything drastic or anything like that, but it is not the best that it could be, I guess. Then the footage at the end of the month, still bent. I will say though, in both of the clips, my hand is nice and open. My wrist is bent, but my hand is open. And it looks really good. It's not like tight and seized up, so that's cool. The last exercise in the arm category is reaching my arm behind me. The footage at the beginning of the month, I tried to make my elbow as straight as possible for some quality movement. It did inevitably end up bending while I was moving it, but it was cool to try and keep it straight while I was doing that. I think I should continue trying to do that because it might improve some movement along the way. And then the footage at the end of the month, I didn't try to keep it straight because I forgot that I did that at the beginning of the month, but it looks fine. I don't really have too much to say about that one. Moving on to the third category, the foot movement. Okay, first exercise is pointing and flexing my feet. The footage at the beginning of the month doesn't look like anything special. It looks like what has been happening in past months. But then the footage at the end of the month that I just took yesterday, I will say I gained a new movement in my ankle that I was really excited about. I didn't look excited because I was concentrating and trying to keep it going. But actually, I will say I did just get back from traveling back from being home for a week for a wedding. I noticed because when I'm on planes, I try to make sure I move my ankles as much as possible because I get really swollen in my feet and in my legs after flying. So I try to make sure I'm moving my ankles and my toes as much as possible. So while I was on the plane, I crossed my left leg over my right and I was trying to do some of these ankle exercises. And I noticed that it was a lot easier than usual. So while I was doing this exercise, my ankle kind of pointed further, a little bit inverted, but further than it normally would. And that was really exciting. So looking forward to what that's going to turn into. The next exercise is raising and lowering my ankle, which is essentially what I was doing on the plane actually. The footage at the beginning of the month looks about the same as usual, nothing too special with that one. But still looking good. Still pretty quality movement with that one. I've never been disappointed with that, so that's good. Then the footage at the end of the month, you can kind of see me look over at the camera because it felt like it was going a lot further than usual. Like I said, how it was on the plane. Then the next exercise is wiggling my toes. Okay, the footage at the beginning of the month, I didn't realize that my foot did do this, but after I contract my toes inward and then let go to mimic the motion of wiggling your toes, my foot, or like my ankle, kind of lowers on its own, very slightly, but it does do it. And then in the footage at the end of the month, I want you to pay attention to my ankle movement this time. It really lowers quite a lot, and it was kind of shocking to me, actually. I was like, I don't feel like I've noticed this movement before, but apparently it did do it slightly before, so there's that. Moving on to the last category, leg movement. So the first exercise is kicking my butt with my heel. The footage at the beginning of the month looks pretty good. I feel like the footage from October was slightly better, if anything, so whatever. And then the footage at the end of the month, you can see that I notice in the viewfinder that it was going up quite a bit further than usual. I was very close to kicking my butt in that clip. So that was really cool. Actually, I'm gonna insert some screenshots of the two next to each other. Maybe I can put it right here on the screen, just to kind of show you just how much closer I am. It is hard because I was wearing loose pants in the last clip, but yeah, it's interesting to see that. Maybe I'll start doing that kind of comparison when I'm doing that exercise. Okay, next exercise is the straight leg fire hydrant kicks. The footage at the beginning of the month looks like I'm getting my leg pretty high up there. It's almost at 90 degrees, if not it is all the way at 90 degrees. But I will say my knee was bent and it wasn't the best quality movement, so that's something I could work on. But then the footage at the end of the month, my leg looks, or like my knee looks pretty straight. I'm pretty happy with the quality movement. It does get pretty high, and my balance is looking pretty good when I'm doing that exercise, so that's pretty cool too. The next exercise is balancing on my affected leg. At the beginning of the month, I got a whopping 8.6 seconds, so that was really good. I feel like I could have done better at the end of the month. I only got 6.9 seconds, but I will say my husband was in the kitchen next to me and I felt a little bit distracted, so I wasn't super focused on keeping my balance. And then, as you guys know, I always end my exercise session with this yoga pose that I figured out how to do in my sister's yoga class that she was teaching. I actually just recently went to 2 of her classes, and I remembered what the pose was called. I'm pretty sure it's called dancer's pose. Let me Google that really quick. Yeah. It has like a longer official name, but they call it dancer's pose. If you want to look it up, that's essentially what I'm trying to do. Obviously, it's hard with one working arm and one working leg, but that's my kind of adaptation to that yoga pose, and it feels really good to stretch my affected legs quad. So yeah, that pretty much concludes this month's episode of Breaking 10,000 Barriers. Thank you guys so much for watching. As I said in the beginning, I'm really looking forward to next month's episode because I think it's going to be really interesting to see the progress that I've made throughout the whole year. And yeah, I will see you next month for another Breaking 10,000 Barriers episode. But once again, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, follow me on all my socials linked in the description down below, and I will see you next week for another new video. Okay, bye!